Yo, 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 what's up, y'all? It's your boy Big Mike in the building. Swish for real. How y'all living? Yes, sir. Boogie Boogie Bob. I got my co-host with me, man, and hopefully Wild Dog will join us a little later. But we're here, man. Sorry we kind of delayed you guys, but Boogie, how's your weekend? And well, your week. How's your week been going so far?
Well, getting ready to celebrate another trip around the sun next Tuesday. So, yeah, be the big 6-6
Wow, man, you young. Congratulations, man. And you said next Tuesday?
next Tuesday. Yeah.
So next Tuesday would be the 7th. Yep, and I got that on my calendar. My guy. Well, I want to wish you happy birthday here first. And Tuesday the 7th, Boogie Bob will be celebrating his birthday, man. Congratulations. Me, I've just been really super busy, man. With the film, trying to keep it going, keep people interested in it, trying to get to 100,000 views on it, and we're way, way behind on them. But I'm still gonna promote it, still gonna get it out there. Got a couple things in the fire that I've been working on as far as other projects, and just been kind of enjoying life at the moment, man. I got my grandson in town for the next month. So he's been a terror around the house. So it's been kind of fun having him around.
Is it different chasing them around in this age than when you chased your kids around?
It doesn't feel like it feels the same because it brings back memories of when my son was that age and I had to chase him around. So it kind of floods all back. So I enjoy it. But
What,
cool, huh?
what's your grandson's name?
It's Logan.
Logan.
Yeah, Logan. You might hear him in the background screaming, playing with
All
my
right.
son.
And a couple years from now, we'll be having him as a co-host.
Man, he'll hop on here for sure, and I'm pretty sure he'll enjoy it. But anyways, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get the show started. And I know Wimbenyama has been really prevalent in the last couple of years. He's been seen in China doing um, basically hanging out with the monks and practicing Tai Chi and all that good stuff, and becoming a better player and being the one of the high points of the San Antonio Spurs. The question is, what will they be in regards to the 2025-2026 season? Where will they go? You think they're going to make the playoffs? The likelihood is very, very high because they got some very good players. But I'm not quite sure where the prediction stands if they can get there. They got a couple of signings, Bismack Binyambo, Darren Fox is there, Jordan Laughlin, but there's quite a few good players that they have. But Boogie, your thoughts on where San Antonio will land and how they'll fare for this upcoming season?
I I have them as play-in. Uh, I had their ceiling as the number 6 seed, just because the top four teams is going to be tough to crack,
Yep.
and you got 5 or 6 teams fighting for those bottom four spots. So I have them as a play-in, maybe as high as the 6 seed. Uh, there's three things that I noted. One is they got limited depth in in the West, and especially if you make the playoffs, you need depth.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they've got some superstars, but adding those key depth uh, spots when the superstar's not on the court, I think is going to play. They're also a very young team. They've got Harrison Barnes as a veteran, but they don't have too many other veterans. So they're still like what this is Wimby's third season.
Mm-hmm.
So
Season number
and
3.
Castle his second. De'Aaron Fox came in when Dennis Smith Jr. came in, and I think he's like only 8 or 9 years in. He's like
Mm.
26 or 27. So the youth of their team, I think, is it's not to say you can't win, but it's not like Oklahoma City's youth where the second and third team players were just as good, you know. So when you build them from scratch, uh, like they have been, you know, they've had a number one pick, a number four pick, and a number two pick.
Hmm.
It takes time. You know, it wasn't like Oklahoma City where they had multiple multiple first round picks all in the same year. That's coming for San Antonio. They traded Podol and DeJounte Murray and some other players, so they stashed some first round picks, but they haven't come due yet. But
Right.
I think, and it's not that I liked Harrison Barnes when he played for the Mavericks, and he's a good veteran, he's solid, but they're really missing wing players. Uh, you know, defensively, I think they'll be okay, but they really don't have that guy that can consistently hit that corner three pointer or
So
guard
they, I
the
mean,
other.
they picked up Luke Cornett, and you don't think he can actually fill in that corner wing position as far as hitting
Uh,
the three?
in spots, but you know, let's face it, if Cornette was all that good, he would have been starting or playing more minutes for Boston. So uh, he's a good bench and role player, which they definitely needed, but I don't think he's that uh, gunner that you're going to have as a starter.
And your thoughts on Dylan Harper? Will he even bring?
Going to be tough to get playing time. He might have to play out of position. Somebody between De'Aaron Fox, Stephen Castle, and Dylan Harper. One of those three is going to have to play out of position.
Mm.
You know, one's going to have to play off the ball. Uh, I like his pedigree as well. I like to say pedigree matters. His dad, Ron Harper, played along. Uh, wasn't it Jordan? Didn't he play with Jordan? I think he
Yep,
also
he
played with
did with the
Stockton and
Chicago
Malone.
Bulls. He did in the
Yeah.
90's.
So you know, Ron Harper, his dad was that kind of you know, Jordan wasn't really the point guard, but he brought the ball up a lot. So, you know, when Harper's there and Steve Kerr was there, they were kind of the off ball player. And if you watch Rutgers tape of Dylan Harper, it was a lot of ball possession, a lot like Luca and James Harden and John Morant and SGA.
So
So,
you're saying that he might not be able to have more control over the ball because with Chris Paul leaving for free agency and going back to the Clippers, I believe. What does that make? I mean, he has to play point guard at this point. I mean, they got Lindy Waters, who's also a guard.
yeah,
Will you think that
De'Aaron Fox is going to be your starter point guard.
as far as point guard? Okay.
Yeah. And Castle, you know, split some of the time when Fox was on the court, and then the other time when Fox would leave, so this will be the first year that I mean they got Fox in the middle of the year. So you got a three-headed monster that can all play the same position. I haven't seen any tape yet to see if Harper he might be able to play off ball. He he's 6'6", 6'7", so he's definitely tall enough to play. Uh, might be able to play wing. I don't know, but it's that they're strong in one position, two positions, and then they kind of just average at the other two. They don't really have a power forward, and you know they got some bodies they can throw in power forward and wing, but you know they don't really have anybody. They don't really have that third person that you know you can go to and going to get you 10 or 15 every night.
Yeah, and then the funny thing about that is that without them being in the West, they probably what third or fourth in the East. Coming to the East, I'm not. I mean, it's just amazing me how good the West has been throughout these years. So I'm not quite sure if they will be more than what they are as far as the position wise. And you saying there will be a play-in, so that makes them like number 9 or number 10. And
Yeah,
so
and well, you could be seventh or eighth, finish seventh or eighth, and still be in the play-in. Uh, you got to remember the Mitch that took over for Popovich. as coach. So this will be his first full season. Plus, there's a lot of height. There's a lot of length in the West. I
Yes.
mean, Oklahoma City's tall. The Mavericks are tall. Uh, the Lakers added some height. Uh, Jokic and them, there's some height there. Uh, so there's four teams right there that's got a lot of length, and then you add Houston in there, that's six. So Wemby can't guard every one of them.
Nah.
So
It's tough though, man, because they ended up being 13 last year as far as position. It's not bad. I mean, they're Dallas was 10 on IG Wales. We know Oklahoma it was number one and Houston number two last year. I think, yeah, you're right. They might sneak up to the 9 spot, but you looking at everybody now who would drop out because you got still the top five last year was Thunder, Rockets, Lakers, Nuggets, and the Clippers. I mean, which one of those teams would have to drop out in order for them to move up is the question.
the only team I see that could drop out of that would be the Clippers, and that'd be due to health and injuries.
Hmm.
Uh, Sacramento was not even in that running, and they've got
That
Levert
was the ninth
and
spot.
Levert and Sabonis.
Yeah, they were the ninth spot, and I think was it the Grizzlies who put the Mavs out, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Grizzlies were well, they wound up getting the 8th seed. So, but they traded away Desmond Bain, so they're going to be a little weaker.
Yeah,
But
defensively for sure.
you're going to have you're going to have probably 6 teams, maybe 7 teams that are right around uh, from
50
seven down
wins.
to 12, and from the second seed down to the 11th seed, there wasn't many games that separated them. Uh, and I think if I remember right, from the non-home court teams from 5 down to the play-in, there you're only talking like 3 or 4 wins difference. Uh, 3, 4 wins, that's, one game that's won by a last second shot could determine whether you're in or out of the playoffs.
Yeah, because the Rockets, well, you look at the schedule of last year, what the standing was. Since Houston was number two, Thunder had a 68-14 record. Houston had 52-30 record, and the Lakers had 50-32 record. So yeah, you're right. They were pretty much like 4 or 5 games separated into these teams. And when you go down from 3 all the way to 5, all those teams had a 50-32 record. So that's the Lakers, the Nuggets, and the Clippers all had a 50 and
Yeah,
32 record.
I think Memphis was right around 44, 45 wins. Uh,
Memphis with 48 wins last year because they
48.
was right behind the Golden State, but and Golden State had 48 wins.
I can remember when the Mavericks were 7 or 8 seed with Dirk, and they won 51 games just
Yeah,
before the play-in was created. And it literally took you had to have 50 wins just to make the playoffs back then. So you got to after Oklahoma City, and they're the hunted. So it's different when you're the hunter, and like they finished with the best record, what, 2 years in a row now. So and Denver made some moves to try to reinvigorate their team.
yeah,
So I mean, I don't think if Oklahoma City wins 60 plus games again this year, yeah, it might be one of those Vince Carter moments.
yeah. And I think what the Spurs may have to do is really solidify, like you said, those wings. If they can get some good wings besides Castle, they can go somewhere with that team. And I predict that they'll be around by 9 or 10 as well. So I'm not quite sure how far they'll go past the Mavs because the Mavs they revamped basically with Cooper Flag, so they're gonna be probably somewhere in the 5, 6 spots. So that
But
that
that's why I mentioned depth. Wimby doesn't really have. He's got Harrison Barnes, and that's really the only other height they've got. So Wimby can only cover one of those guys. He can't. Some of those front courts that are stacked, you can't cover 2 guys or 3 guys.
Yeah, yeah, and defense is one of them the key factors of winning a lot of championships and also being a great team in the playoffs. And speaking of defense, man, the top five defensive players that's coming up this season, and they also were also probably some of the better top five in this past season. Who are your top five when it comes to defensive players currently?
Well, I have 5 specific players, uh, and I kinda have them in a pseudo ranking of from 1 to 5.
Okay.
Uh, Kawhi Leonard, I got number 1.
Why? Why Kawhi?
When he's healthy, they call him a claw for the reason, but even at his age, he's one of the best defensive and two-way players. He made his mark as a defensive player with Tim Duncan and Parker and them. But he single-handedly took the Mavericks out of the playoffs in the bubble and in the following year. Uh, one great game, he had 40 plus points. But on the wing, he's got great anticipation. He's got great acceleration. If he's healthy, in my mind, it's not so much that uh, you can't beat him one on one. He's such good positionally, and he's so good. When we talk about basketball IQ, we usually talk about offense, but he's got the defensive basketball IQ and the quickness in the hands and the reach to get there. So that's why I have him number 1.
Gotcha.
Then I have Rudy Gobert, which we'll talk about later. Uh, I still think Drew Holiday, even at his age, now he might not show up in Portland like he did in Boston, but Drew Holiday is a load. And then
let, let me ask you that on Drew Holiday, man. Do you think that was a good move for Boston, letting him go to Portland? Because now Boston is looking like they are really trying to burn the building and start all over. And will Drew be a factor for the Portland Trail Blazers?
if Tatum didn't get hurt, it's not a good move. But with Tatum being out and he got injured in the playoffs,
Mhm.
uh, and they were either at or near the second apron, which severely limits. So they knew that paycheck was coming. They were going to have to ditch salary. They got
Mm,
rid of Porzingis as well. Hey, another player I've got on my list, Derek White, is still there.
yeah.
So instead of having 2 great defensive perimeter players, you got 1 now.
What
So
about Jalen Brown? He's really good defensively.
I think, well, as you know, you played it. Two-way players are rare, but if you're expected to be the defensive stopper, you don't have a whole lot of energy for offense, and you might be able to create your shot, but as you know, when we coach, legs go, shot goes. So you're gonna burn up a lot of energy playing defense. So he's gonna have to pick his spots of when to lead offensively or when to lead defensively. And I think you'll see him hide in a corner, take a play off offensively, and maybe take a play off defensively. But you can't play 38 minutes out of a 48 minute game and expect to just burn high energy at both ends.
And I think with Jalen Brown, he has the ability to be a superstar, but I think what's hindering him is that the fact that he has to share that ring with Chase and Tatum. So I don't know how far they can go without either one of them, but it's gonna be
Or
tough for
without their
sure.
centers. They basically lost all 3 of their centers.
Yeah,
Traded Porzingis, they lost Cornette, and they did not resign Al Horford.
yeah.
So, they basically are starting over at center. But I mean, I agree with Jalen Brown would normally be on my list as a defensive player, but I didn't for this year. I didn't have him there. that's a lot to ask of one player.
Yeah, and I have to look it up. But will Tatum start the season?
Tatum injured his Achilles in April or late May, or early May, or so. That's a 9 to 12 month return. They say he's in the gym taking shots, but when you tear an Achilles, you got to be able to cut, move, and jump. And oh, that'd be pushing the timeline pretty. If you remember, Clay Thompson had in the playoffs tore his Achilles,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then the next year in preseason when he's getting ready for the regular season, he tore his ACL.
yeah. I know he hated that. And who your other on your list?
So I had Derek White,
Hmm.
and then you can't have a defensive list without Wemby, who averaged 3+ blocks per game. I mean, we haven't seen anybody in the NBA that blocks that many shots per game since Dikembe Mutombo
I was gonna say
or
Shaq,
Olajuwon.
because Shaq also blocked 3 blocks a game when he was
In
with
his
Orlando.
Orlando days, yeah, maybe early Laker days. But when you look at throughout their whole career, Mutombo and Olajuwon were much more consistent over their careers.
Right, right, right. And my 5 defensive players, I had Victor Wanyamba, I had Rudy Gobert, Bam Adiambo, Draymond Green, and for some odd reason, Alex Caruso. You know what I mean? I think Alex, without him being where he was with Oklahoma, it would have been tough for them to really do a lot of things that they did defensively.
I
So he
started to
actually
put
did them.
I started to put Caruso on my list. Uh, but the two Indiana guys are Nebhart and Naismith are pretty dang good defenders.
Oh yeah, man. And if you had to do over, if Halliburton did get hurt, would that series be 7 games?
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, that's my 5, man. I think with Alex Caruso being in there, he brings the tenacity that Oklahoma was kind of missing defensively. They had him when they faced off against Dallas in the playoffs. I don't think Dallas would have made it through. Well, maybe they would have, because you have this the at the time that guy from Slovenia.
How many losses did Oklahoma City have last year? Like
14, I believe.
14, and three of those were to the Mavericks,
That's crazy.
and that's with Caruso. But that I mean, he made a difference, obviously, defensively and hitting the clutch 3 pointers. But what I recognized more was Oklahoma just kept throwing the ball away, or Naismith or Nebhart would get get a steal on the inbound and then get a layup. And there were like 5 right in a row. And you saw Dagnall put Crusoe in. And at least Caruso was smart enough to see the scheme that they were running and get the ball in bounds. But the other that was the critical part that I saw when they won the game, is when Indiana went into a pseudo press to steal the inbound. It was one of those, wasn't a full press, but if they get the ball back, they haul butt back to the defensive side. But Net Naismith and Nebhart were creeping up, kind of faking like they were going back and looking for that quick inbound, and they were there to steal it. Like I remember there was 5 of them in that one game in the second half. That's like 10 points. That's a 10 point. That's a When you look at it, that you don't only get the possession, but you give up a layup. That's a 20-point swing.
Yeah. And what will think of that series? Conley, is it Connolly, that shooter that came off the bench? He really racked it up. Am I tripping on his last name? That guy.
Uh, I'll think of his name. it wasn't Conley, like Matt Conley. His dad was a coach. The
Conley,
white
okay,
guy. Yeah, the white guy that was like almost 100% from the 3-point range.
he was killing it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know if
that's a flamethrower that every team needs, whether it's one of the Bogdanoviches or THJ or Clay Thompson, a designated sharpshooter.
yep. And then Indiana did lose some players, but they still have a lot of play. TJ McConnell is his name.
Well, losing Miles Turner is going to be a big loss for
Oh
them.
my God, because with Miles Turner playing the way he did, it's crazy. I don't know what they're gonna do, man. But the coach for Indiana, Rick Carlisle, made the difference, in my opinion, to get them where they were, and he pushed Dallas to greatness in 2011 and got us to that elusive championship we've been looking for so many years. But yeah, I mean, defensively, we can see that Boston is going to struggle for sure. Um, Dallas is going to be improved. And I'm not quite sure what Houston's going to do defensively because they're not going to be as potent without those two guys in there, Forrest Green and what's the kid name? They traded both of them at the same time. He played for Phoenix. No, he played for
They
Memphis.
traded Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks.
Those two. So yeah, and coaching has a lot to do with how these guys perform. And speaking of coaches, Doc Rivers, for the past 5 years, his NBA record has not been too shabby. He only had one bad season, and that was when he first got to Milwaukee. And I don't know where he stands legacy wise with his career. He is such a great coach. Regular season wise, we got to give him the star when it comes to winning that one championship with the Boston Celtics. What are your thoughts on Doc Rivers and the legacy that he's leaving for himself? Give me your thoughts and let's discuss Doc Rivers.
You said he was the coach for the Celtics team that won with KG and Jet Terry and Ray Allen.
Wasn't he? With when he
I'd have to look it up.
was Ray Allen on that team? Because I know it was Big Baby. Who was all on that squad? I know
Paul
KG was
Pierce.
on that
The
squad.
big three were Paul Pierce and KG and Jason Terry came off the bench. That was before
So,
the Lakers had their run. It was the Lakers and the Celtics. I don't
yeah, that was
remember. I
2008
don't.
title.
I
Yeah.
don't remember Doc being the coach though.
No, he won in 2008. Who was on that squad? I'd have to look it up. The 2008 Celtics. Uh,
Was Pierce and Kevin Garnett were the two big guns. They called it the big three. Jason Terry went there after he played for the Mavericks.
okay, so no, that's the wrong one then, because you had Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, Kendrick Perkins, James Posey, and Eddie House is probably the most prominent people that we can think of in regards to that particular roster. And man, they were
Yeah,
pretty
play
decent.
a young Rajon Rondo, playoff Rondo.
And Paul Pierce was pretty young at the time.
Yeah, that's what I said. Paul Pierce and KG were the two big guns because Minnesota traded Garnett to Boston. So I, he to me record wise and play when you just look at his record, he's not the mad scientist of Nelly, but he's kind of one of those coaches that he can get you 45 or 50 wins, but he look at the talent he had with the Clippers. A young Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, a young DeAndre Jordan.
Man,
Couldn't even get him to the Western Conference Finals.
Lob City, that's crazy.
And people forget that I remember Doc Rivers more. Well, he was even in Atlanta, I think, as a coach. Uh, but I remember Doc Rivers more as a player than I have as a coach. Don't only I think he got a lot of notoriety being the Clippers coach. A little bit overrated. So, and now that you mention it, wasn't it the Clippers gave Boston a first round pick to sign Doc Rivers?
They did because they traded him to Boston.
Yeah. So,
And that's the first thing I've ever heard of a coach being traded. I didn't think you could do that.
well, if they're under contract, you can be it's a form of a buyout, you know. Uh, but is he at Philly now? Isn't that where he's
He,
at?
yeah, he's in Philly right now at the current position. Am I tripping or was it? Let me take a double check because now he's Milwaukee. No,
He's at
no, yeah, he's
Milwaukee.
in Milwaukee
Yeah, so
because they fired.
he's been coach for quite a few teams, but I I remember him as a legitimate point guard, a very tough player, defensive minded, but if you let him loose, he could score on you. You know, he's an old fashioned point guard.
Do you think his legacy is tarnished after the Celtics championship? Because he hasn't really he's took a few teams to the playoffs for sure, but he has not reached that promised land again, not even to a conference finals.
Nelly had the same kind. That's why I compared him to Don Nelson. Uh, Nelly had the same kind of genius, you know.
So you comparing them to Don Nelson in reference to how they were coaching the team, or in reference to
No,
how
just
the regular.
as far as if you measure the success by number of rings and how whether they get a team to Western Conference Finals. There's some coaches that are really good in the regular season, but playoffs are a different animal, and what works in the regular season doesn't necessarily work in the playoffs.
Yeah, true statement. Because, like you said, with the Clippers, when they had Doc Rivers, he was very, very good in the regular season. Showstoppers, the crowd was always into the game, and he made the entertainment value way up there. I mean, so but in the playoffs, it was a whole different story. And I
Yeah,
don't know.
they didn't get near as many lobs, you know. Blake Griffin's weaknesses showed up, you know. If he wasn't dunking, you know, which is funny because he played at OU and you saw him take a lot of outside shots at OU, but he gets in the pros if he was past about 4 or 6 feet, he was an inconsistent shooter. Uh,
Mm,
and DeAndre Jordan was just a lob, and you know teams schemed for that and took the lob away, and they just didn't have any other players. And Doc Rivers, you can only if you don't have the talent, scheme will only get you so far.
yeah, and I'm thinking like when you mentioned um Donnie Nelson and Doc Rivers, it reminded me of when the Mavs faced off against because they when they faced off the Clippers 2 years ago in the finals, the lob was taken away. I mean, they couldn't do that a lot because how can you defend that? Because the pick and roll was always there until they got to the finals, and that pick and roll was kind of diminished because of the defensive players that Boston had. So it kind of gives the same feeling that the Clippers had when, as you said, when they were in the playoffs, that lob was taken away.
Yeah, I mean, and Blake Griffin, if he had a low post threat where they could just dump it into him, play the inside out game, it might have been able to go. But you know, scheme gets you so far. Coaching will only you can only coach talent up so far, and that's if they want to be coached. You know, some of these superior athletes, even in junior high and middle school, you know, they know they're the best player on the team, and they don't want to be coached. You know, and when they run a drill, they're giving 50% effort and not 100% effort, and then they wonder why in a game they can't. I used to preach over and over again. We're going to practice at game speed.
You got
If
to.
you don't practice at game speed, and you get in a game, you're not going to react in time. But
Yeah, and I'm thinking about what you said too, and I was like, well, they had DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin. I mean, they're pretty decent players, but when it comes down to it, neither one of them you could throw that ball into the post to, and that's probably the
yeah,
reason why.
you can scheme a defense to take the lob away. You're going to give something else up. You can give a corner three away, or you're going to give a top of the key three away. But if the other team don't have that player, you can scheme and shut down the point guard's penetration to where he don't have the room or space or liberty to get to a lob. You know, so a two-man game works when you got a Jason Terry and a Dirk Nowitzki, or you got a Larry Bird and a uh, Danny Ainge, or Robert Parrish and Larry Bird, or even McHale and Bird. When you got two players that play off of each other, and the defense tries to take a specific play away, they can adapt, and that's where I think that's the downfall of Doc Rivers. He can move the chess pieces around on the board, but he doesn't know how to move them in a way such that he wins in the playoffs consistently.
Yeah, and to wrap this up, what do you think his legacy ends as far as who he was as a coach? That it just ends with he did with the Clippers, or that ends with how
I
he was
think
inept?
I think his legacy as a player exceeds his legacy as a coach.
Gotcha. I get it. I get it. And much respect to Doc Rivers. I'm glad he had an opportunity to get a ring. And so that's all we can say about him. But yeah, my thoughts on him is like basically, I think he was pretty good in Boston. He took Boston to a place where he could. But I think also he doesn't like to make changes when he's supposed to in mid game changes, like with the Clippers. He could have done a lot better with changing some of the strategies play wise and get the better players to. I mean, I think he was more at the Clippers level when he was with them. He was playing more to the audience than he was trying to win a championship.
Well, and
Um,
that's what makes Rick Carlisle so great. You know, in-game adjustments, after timeout adjustments.
mhm,
Carlisle see what you're trying to do and take that away from you. Make you beat him some other way. Uh,
yeah,
him and Popovich, that's why they so long. Spolster's very good at that. He wasn't at first, but Spolster's also been very good at, you know, managing. You play chess. A lot of people, once they lose their queen, they can't play a game of chess. And but there's some coaches in the NBA that they're like, hey, I'll play without my queen on the chessboard, and I'll still beat you and put you in checkmate.
yeah. I've done that before. So thanks. Shout out to Chess. Um, our next subject, this guy, the Stifle Tower is what they call him in France. He's a really good player. We mentioned him earlier in regards to some of the top five defensive players of the current NBA. Rudy Gobert. He how does he solidify himself in regards to where he is now? But we're going to take a deep dive and we're going to let Boogie Bob talk about Rudy Gobert as a player and his thoughts on where he can his career should end up, and what are our thoughts on him. Boogie Bob,
So
give us your
so
thoughts.
first off, I want to say that go up Swish for Real up there. There's a video posted on Swish for Real uh, about the Rudy Gobert when Luca's got him dancing in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And he's going one way and then the other way and then the other way and then the other way. Next thing you know, Luca's firing up a 3-pointer over him. Uh, but so go watch that post on Swish for Real. I'm going to use a term that I heard Carlisle when he talked about Rudy Gobert. He called him Inspector Gadget. And if you follow the comics and all that, and Inspector Gadget had arms just coming out of everywhere from every angle and every kind of way, and that's how Carlisle. He's like, how do you go up? He goes, you talking about Inspector Gadget? Because Rudy Gobert has got extremely long reach. Uh, so you 4-time defensive player of the year. You don't get that by accident. Well, once you might get it by accident, but 4 times. He almost got a 5th one last year. So he anchored last year for Minnesota. He anchored the 10th best defense in the NBA last year with Minnesota.
Crazy.
They were top 10 in field goal percentage. His stats, his individual stats. Rudy Gobert was top 10 in field goal percentage, top 10 in rebounds, and top 10 in blocks. You have several players, well, not several, but in the top 10 of 2 categories is a pretty small list, but top 10 in 3 categories. When you include blocks, he was 9th in the NBA in blocks. He's a walking double-double. Those are the good attributes of Rudy Gobert. In my mind, Luka exposed that play I'm talking about. Luka exposed his weakness, like he used to do with the Clippers center. And that's his perimeter defense. He when you're that big, that tall, and big feet, it's hard to pivot and move quickly. I wouldn't say he doesn't have lateral quickness. It's that he doesn't know how to move to keep up with the guard. So teams can easily expose him by forcing him to come out and guard the perimeter, which is his weakness. Like I mentioned earlier, he's got a very long wingspan, so it makes him a good rim protector. To give you an idea how good, layups or dunks when he was on the court for Minnesota was 57% for the other team. When he was not on the court, layups and dunks were 62%. So a 5% difference when he's not on the court. I think not only because he doesn't know how to pivot and turn, but he's got slow feet, which is typical for a big man. So when you got slow feet, that's going to hinder your lateral quickness. Now, one step he can cover a lot of ground, but if you're slow to move it, then it don't matter how tall you are, you can't get there. And here's one last interesting statistic. He's never made a 3-point field goal in his career.
No way. Not one?
Not one.
Has he attempted any is the question.
He has attempted some, yes.
He never made one. And so with him moving over from the Jazz to the Timberwolves, what if he would have stayed with,
4 first round picks.
dang. What if he would have stayed with the Timberwolves? I mean, not the Timberwolves, with the Jazz. What they would have made a difference. He would have made a difference with the Jazz at the time.
He was young enough you could probably build around him, but the fact that young Mavericks team, Luka, the first time they went to the Western Conference Final, they didn't just beat Utah. They punished them. I don't remember if Quinn Snyder was still the coach or not, or if I can picture his face, but I can't think of his name now, the coach of them. But they were in the proverbial no man's land. Either you're at the top or you're at the bottom. If you're in the middle, you're in no man's land. You're good enough to make the playoffs, but you're not good enough to win a championship. You got to remember they had Donovan Mitchell who could light it up.
Yeah.
And they had Jordan Clarkson,
Yeah.
and that Mavericks team without Luka for the first 2 games, even Jalen Brunson was the starting point guard. Him and Dinwiddie, and they just like bye bye.
Yeah, they destroyed. I remember that, man. It was such a good season.
So I mean, if you're a GM and you see a young team like that just destroy you in the first round, like you got to do something. And I
Right.
think when they decided to move, I think they moved Gobert first, and then they moved Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, they just totally broke down that Jazz team, man. And I'm happy he's with Minnesota because I would thought they would have Minnesota would have kept Carl Anthony Towns um, before they would have traded Rudy Gobert. You know what I mean? I don't I it babbles me, but I get it because you got two pretty decent centers, and I think Carl Anthony Towns fits well in New York. But the difference between the two is the defense because Rudy Gobert, as we all know, has won a couple of Defensive Players of the Year awards. Carl Anthony Towns has not. So that's probably the most prominent thing of why they chose to part ways with Carl than parting ways
Yeah,
with Gobert.
they didn't quite fit together. Uh, you had to play one or the other. And Towns is more of a stretch forward than he is a center.
Yeah.
He wants to shoot the outside three and occasionally post up. But, you know, I talked about Rudy Gobert being a perimeter defense liability. Well, Carl Anthony Towns is even worse. And when they run the pick and roll, he lumbers to get back in time.
Yeah, Carl Anthony Towns is an anomaly in itself. I'm not quite sure what they're doing with him, but it is what it is.
He's a scoring forward. That's what he is. Score whether you call him a power forward, stretch forward, he's a scoring forward. He he, he doesn't want to be a center.
Yeah, and Where he's Rudy Gobert is from France, so France have made a lot of headway when it comes to a couple of NBA players, and I think with him coming in the league from France, it gives France a little bit of notoriety that they do have some good players out there. Do you have anything else on Rudy Gobert?
Uh Other than giving me a laugh when Luca lit him up, no, I don't have anything else.
Gotcha, gotcha. And I wonder if Rudy, if he played in the 90's, would he be a superstar? And that's going to be our next topic. What five players currently, if they were transported back into the 90's, could they become superstars? And I have a few people I can talk about, but I'm going to let Boogie Bob start the conversation and I'll chime in right after.
Well, I first wrote this, and I need to update what I wrote down. I had a tier one, a tier two, and a tier three, and then I got thinking. I didn't change it. I got thinking of doing it by position. Uh, so let me do it this way. I'm gonna go through it as a tier one, two, and three, and then kind of wrap it up by position. So
Gotcha.
in my tier one, Kawhi Leonard because he's a two-way player. He
Because
would fit any decade.
who would be his rival in the 90's in that position?
Scottie Pippen.
I was thinking the same thing. Him or Barkley would probably be his rival.
Yeah, I mean Barkley was a heck of a rebounder, probably a better rebounder than any one of those two, but he was okay defensively, but he wasn't quite the defensive player that Pippen or Kawhi is. And the other person I had in tier one, now this is not whether they're superstars now. Well, that's the first thing I look at. Are they superstars now? Could they be superstars in the 90s? But I had this other person in tier one simply because of the type of game he plays. I had Julius Randle because
Julius,
Julius Randle is your traditional power forward, low post player.
North Texas
He
native.
occasionally drifts out uh, to the uh, outside, but he's the typical 90s power forward. Uh, Bruiser, you know, you have to have a Rick Mahorn or somebody like that to guard him. Other, you know, just look at the damage Chris Webber did from his
Yeah,
power game.
yeah.
So, so I had those in tier one simply because of what their games fit the 90s. Uh, tier two, so I had Pablo Banchero because you could have him as a power forward or a small forward in the 90s.
Yeah.
He had enough quickness that he could destroy a tall guy. He has enough beef that he can destroy a small guy. So, he's a Swiss Army knife that would have fit really well in the 90's on any of those teams that won championships. He's he's kind of a James Worthy type uh, player in the sense that he can do multiple things, but he's not. He's probably asked to do more in Orlando than Worthy was at the Lakers.
Yeah. And I thought of him in reference to Sam Perkins for whatever reason, if he was to be shifted back to the 90's, because Sam Perkins and him were kind of similar. The only difference is Sam Perkins was a better 3-point shooter.
Sam was a better 3-point shooter, but he was a Swiss Army knife as well.
Yeah.
He could play some center. He could play power forward. He was quick enough and defensively good enough to play small forward. So that's why I put Banchero in there. Uh, then I have three names as in my tier two. I have them all equal, and I only have them there in tier two not because of the type of game they play, but because of their superstars now. Well, Cuban will argue that one of these isn't, but superstars transcend any era of basketball or any style. But KD, LeBron, and Russell Westbrook, you could
And
plug.
then Russell Westbrook, they kind of mirrored him to Oscar Roberts back when Oscar Roberts played. So um, Russell Westbrook and Oscar Robertson are kind of similar players in my opinion, but the 90's had to be a different story.
You got to think of the type of style. Most of the 90's was half court, slow down, beef it up, physical play. So point guards were not so much get to the rim or shoot. It was like you had Stephon Marbury and Stevie Francis and uh, Kevin Johnson. You know, so in the 90's, you had your point guard was get it to the big guy, get it to
John
the big guy,
Stockton.
and then kick it out for the outside shot. Uh, and so Westbrook's kind of on that edge, but his athleticism, I think, he would have fit in any style, any of those '90's teams. KD just simply because you can't stop him, he can score, And LeBron, I mean, LeBron's 6'8" and what 245, 250. I don't think there's anybody in the '90's that would have been able to stop him. Now, he might not have finished the game with all his teeth, and he might have had blood running down his face because the bad boys would have just clobbered him, between my Lambeer and Mahorn and Rodman and John Sally. They just would have knocked his ass to the ground every time he came in. And LeBron much bigger than Michael Jordan. I think he would have been able to power through it, but he might have had a bruised rib and a couple missing teeth and a black eye by the time the game was finished. Uh,
Dang.
but there was no the closest thing the '90's had to LeBron was Magic Johnson.
Yeah, true, true.
So my tier three, I have basically four players all similar, and I don't know that they could play in the '90's because they're so ball dominant. In the '90's, you had isolation plays. And it was usually your small forward or power forward. You dumped it in, and the isolation play was was the big guy. It wasn't the point guard or shooting guard. But Ant Man, SGA, Luca, and James Harden.
James
Oh,
Harden. Jason
yeah.
Harden would be a good scorer, but as far as defensively, he probably get beat up a lot. So I don't know if he'll be as an efficient scorer.
Like I said, and all four of those are ball dominant players. So, uh, would they fit in the '90's? That's the only reason they're in the tier three. It's not their talent. It's would they fit the game that was played back in the '90's, which was more of a throw it to the inside, then kick it out. It wasn't 5 out or around the rim or penetrate and then kick out. It was a lot more of a the point guard got it to the small forward or the power forward, and they made their move, and it either went to the center or it got kicked back out. So, and then it made me think all the shooting guards that were on those Bulls teams, and one I'm sure there's more than one, but we talked about sharpshooters. Klay Thompson would have been great in the 90's
Hmm.
because you put Klay Thompson on that Bulls team and he's got 6 rings instead of 4. I mean, he's basically what Steve Kerr was to the Bulls and to the Spurs. He was a designated sharpshooter, and he was the Bruce Bowen of defense. So, I mean, think what Phil Jackson could have done with him with the Bulls or with the Lakers in the 90's.
That'd have been a freak of nature, especially Klay Thompson, because Klay Thompson, he broke records when it comes to 3 pointers. And he had what, a couple 50-point games, so he can score and he moves well without the ball, kind of like him and Curry. Curry, same thing.
Yeah, he could play off the ball. He wasn't ball dominant. I remember them talking about when they were winning championship, he took the least amount of dribbles of any player in the NBA that year. They won the last championship.
Wow.
So, he was a great spot up shooter, or a defense come flying at him. And so, you know, can you imagine a Magic Johnson dumping it into James Worthy? James Worthy makes his move. Kareem's not open, and he kicks it across the court to Klay Thompson wide open with nobody within 15 feet of him.
Splash. That's why they call them the Splash Brothers.
I, I mean, so that's the kind of player when I look at shooting guard. So I described a couple of power forwards and small forwards and guard.
Hmm.
Uh, if I were to redo this by position, the ones I didn't mention were centers because
Wow.
you had 2 types of centers in the 90's. You had your Patrick Ewing, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Robert Parrish, who could score and could defend some. And then you had your bruisers, uh, like James Donaldson and Bill Laimbeer and those guys. So you either were big and could stop somebody because you were the fire hydrant in the paint, you know, zones weren't played. It was man to man as long as you weren't in there more than 3 seconds. So centers today, there's only a couple of them that are big enough to play that kind of physical game. And I'm not
Mm.
sure. I mean, Rudy Gobert and Jokic are 2 of the bigger ones that might be able to physically take it. But the the one that really came to mind, and you wouldn't even think of him as far as a plug and play, but uh, Bobby Bon Bon
Bogdanovic.
Bogdan, yeah, Boban for that played with the Mavericks and the Spurs for a little bit.
Yeah.
He was slow of foot, but wasn't nobody going to go through him, or they might be able to go around him, but they had to go around him. He's big and physical.
Yeah. Yeah, I
You
agree
know,
with that.
a, then there's 2 other specialists that played in the 90's. You had Hakeem Olajuwon with the dream shake that could score,
Facts.
and the closest thing you've got to that right now is Joel Embiid.
Joel Embiid. But Olajuwon's way quicker than Joel Embiid
Way
is.
quicker, but their moves are similar.
Yeah, because he
I mean, he
trained
can
with
get a shot.
Olajuwon.
And then the other specialty center of the 90's was Dikembe Mutombo.
I would say Patrick Ewing was pretty special too.
Yeah, I mentioned Patrick Ewing earlier because he was a scoring center that could block shots.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my 5, if you let me kind of go over what I got, I'll be more than happy to tell you.
I like to
So,
hear your 5.
yeah. A couple of them you named already. Well, all of you really named, but LeBron James is the top of the list for me because he plays a lot like Magic Johnson, and he's physical, and he's able to get up and down the court, and he plays both ends of the court for the most part. When you come think about what Magic Johnson did, LeBron, it's kind of similar. I know we talked about this before, but if you had to transport him into the 90's, I definitely can see him playing in the 90's basically because of his IQ. The kid is phenomenal, especially coming out of there was a lot of high school players that we didn't mention that came through. They were played in the 90's and the 2000s as well. But LeBron coming out of high school in the 90's would be just a shoe in because he not out. If he played for Cleveland at the time, he would have had a squad. You had Mark Price, you would have had Brad Daugherty, you would have had a squad. So y'all probably would have made the championship that year he came out because he pretty much pushed it at whatever team he had to the championship. So I think he would fare well in the 90's.
Let
Another
me ask,
guy,
let me ask you this, since you mentioned he came straight out of high school, and by the way, that was the last year that you could come straight out of high school. If you had to choose between Kevin Garnett straight out of high school and LeBron straight out of high school, who do you take?
LeBron and Kevin Garnett is the next person on my list, yeah, ironically, but I would take LeBron because LeBron, Kevin, not saying Kevin was a shabby person at all. He reminds me of Kevin Garnett, that is more like Detlef Shrimp. You know what I mean? Detlef Shrimp, but more athletic. He could shoot. He could post you up. He could do all the things that you want as far as a player at that position. Douglas Shrimp and Kevin Garnett mirror each other, in my opinion. So if I had to choose out of LeBron and Kevin Durant out of high school, it would be LeBron because LeBron had way more of an IQ. Not saying that Kevin doesn't have a great IQ when he came in the league, but he took time to develop. You know what I mean? And he was good, but he wasn't LeBron good when you came in the league. When you were crowned the champion, well, not the champion, but the king of a freaking state. Come on, so it's harder for Kevin Durant to do something like that. Not saying he couldn't do it at the time, but in the 90's, it would probably have been too hard for him to do what LeBron would be able to do in the 90's. So Kevin Durant was second on my list in regards to top five players that would make it in the NBA and become superstars. Because Kevin Durant, he freak of nature. Even though he says he's not 7 feet tall, you stand him next to other players who are 7 feet tall, he's right there with them. So he's 7 feet tall. So I get it. You don't want to let people.
He's a taller version of Tracy McGrady.
Man, he's really, really good. Talented as all get out. And there's nothing you can say that would persuade me that he was not been as good as Detlef Shrimp or better. Again, he's athletically, his skill, man, he's versatile. He play a little defense and he's not afraid to post up players, even the smaller players. Don't put a small on him because he's gonna post you up. He's gonna give you that work, and that's what Kevin Durant do. He can do that from in the current years now, the 2000, and he would have did that in the 90's as well because I think he would have adjusted to the defense as he did with the 2000s. You know what I mean? So he's not a bad player at all. As far as who I would have picked out of him and LeBron, it would have been LeBron. As far as the 90's, and Kevin Durant probably would have been like maybe fourth or fifth on that list. My next person, and I think just basically, if you think of Arvidas Sabonis, he reminds me kind of him now, and that's Nikolai Jokic. Nikolai could have definitely made the 90's and played very well. He probably, I would say, it would have took him maybe 3 to 4 years to really get to where he is now as far as a player because it would have been hard for him because they would have did everything possible to make sure that ball got out of his hand, and that's where his passing would have came in because he's a great passer just like Sabonis was back in the 90's. Both of them would have been pretty good passers. Now being him on the Denver's team at that time, I don't think they would have made the playoffs because they didn't have a great squad at that time in the 90's. Denver was pretty much struggling a lot. They had some decent players, but they didn't have any standout players. And no Nikolai Jokovic, depending on what the higher ups as far as the coaches and staff and the owners would do as far as putting the right players around Nikolai. If he wasn't in the 90's era, he probably would have been a great player. They probably would have made the playoffs several times for sure, just by him. But again, it would have took him at least 3 years to get to that point where
Well, if you
he's
remember Arvidas Sabonis, uh, the guy in Sacramento's dad, he
right.
came late. He played for Portland, and that was after that Walton years, and so Portland didn't have a lot of talent around Arvidas either.
They put the one Rasheed Wallace with him at one point in time, and
Yeah, yeah.
they had not only
I
him, but
think
they had
Zebo might have even been up there about that time, but I think it was in that
Cartwright was
period.
with them too because they had him and Cartwright. I remember that.
Yeah, but it was after the Clyde Drexler and before the LaMarcus Aldridge, Brandon Roy period. It was in
Correct,
between
correct.
the two.
And he played well. So I'm thinking Nikolai would have had the same situation. So he would have been like trying to. They probably would have put a decent team around him, but would they would have made the playoffs? Probably, but it would have been very low on the total polls in regards to the positioning. My fourth player rather on that list is Stephen Curry, and you mentioned him already. Stephen Curry, man, if he played, so Golden State at the time was not too bad. They were pretty decent. That was the run TMC at that time, and them dudes could hoop. And you throw him in there, oh come on, man, they're gonna light it up. They gonna they made the playoffs then, but then with a Stephen Curry, man, who they would have been like Showtime, basically. They would have been Showtime 2.0 because you have all those shooters around you. Mitch Richmond.
Let me ask you this: wouldn't he been like Steve Nash on that Phoenix Suns team that almost made the finals?
Man, yeah. He would have, man, just imagine him playing with Chris Mullin, Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, Stephen Curry. Who's stopping that? Who's stopping that? Because you got to play them offensively because they're gonna get their buckets. So you got to figure out another way to slow them down because who you slowing down? Because Stephen Curry moves without the ball. You got a point guard that's not afraid to penetrate and kick it out, and he can score. So he's
Well,
the inventor of the crossover.
the reason I mentioned Nash and the Suns, if you remember, Nash never picked up his dribble. If they
Nah,
cut off the layup, he'd just dribble on through and dribble on back out, and then the reset. And he had Antonio McDyess and Sean Marion and uh, that other center,
Stoudemire.
Stoudemire, Amari Stoudemire. I mean, that Phoenix team played a lot like the Golden State team. D'Antoni's system, shoot within 5 to 8 seconds.
Yeah. I don't know if that because Rich Adelman was the coach of that era, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think Rich Adelman coached him at the time when he had the Run TMC. So adding Curry to that would definitely push them over the top. That would have been hard to. They would have been very hard to beat at the time. So I'm not quite sure who would handle that squad because Curry on that squad, it's a wrap. And my last and final player for my top five, he got his team to the championship. They didn't win it, but they got there. And he plays like if I would have to compare him to somebody in the 90's, I would say, who do you compare him to? And I'm speaking of Luka Doncic. He would have been a superstar in the league at that time because he has the size, the strength, the ability to bully you, and he's a great passer. And it's hard to really figure
I'll
out
give,
who he.
I'll give you two names in the '90s
Go ahead.
because he wouldn't have been a point guard in the '90s. He would have been Adrian Dantley or Mark Aguirre, a small forward.
What if they would have moved him to the point? You know what I mean? 'Cause, man, I know in the 90's a lot of the point guards were 6'5" and under, but
They
moving
were
him to the
smaller. They were more Kyrie size, but look at 6'6", 6'7", and his girth and his ability to create his own shot in the '90s. he would have been we're going to run the offense through you and we're going to post you up like they did Adrian Dantley in Denver or Mark Aguirre in Detroit or Dallas.
Well, so then you have to go back to what Magic Johnson did. You know what I mean? They was at the tail end of the 80's going into the 90's. So it would have been similar almost. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah, the only other guy that tall that was a point guard in the 90's was Jalen Rose,
yeah, yeah, but
your
still, I mean,
Michigan guy.
I still think they would have put him at point, basically because
They
of how
might
they were.
have, but I'm just saying his game, even when non-skinny Luca was here, he did a lot more posting up. He did a lot more dribble into the paint and then the little Dirk fade away to the little turnaround. He
And
quit.
plus,
He basically quit going to the hole for layups. You
no,
know,
and he would have been drafted. It would say technically he probably would have been drafted by the Mavericks. Basically, we just keep him on the same team. But the Mavericks at that time wouldn't have had a great team or a great coach in the 90's because they were up and down with coaches. So could it have been something
he,
similar to what happened to the
so
three
you're
J's?
talking about the 3J era.
Yeah.
So
So
the closest thing they had in the early 90's was Mashburn.
yeah, so that would have put him probably on a trade block because the coaching and the ownership at the time could not keep that team together no matter what they tried. And I think Luca would have probably been a Dudley Shrimp, maybe going to Seattle or maybe Sacramento somewhere. He would have not have been in Dallas because Dallas at that time was going through some turmoil, and I suffered through it as a fan, and it made me a better fan. But Luca in the 90's, he probably would have been a superstar, but it wouldn't have been on the Mavs for sure. But that's my list, my top five in regards to who would make it in the 90's out of current players. You have anything else you want to add to that, Boogie?
Well, I just, the style of the game was different, so that's what I took into consideration. Is not so much the person's talent now, but how they would have been utilized uh, by a coach in the 90's. And like you said, we all real before the term MFFL came into being, Cuban bottom. If you had season tickets, they were like, "What? Why would you waste your money?" And I had season tickets a couple times. So yeah, from they were Herb Williams. They had at the beginning of '90, and we ran through we ran through coaches like changing socks on your feet,
Mm,
and there was 2 or 3 years there where there was like, are they going to break the Sixers record for least amount of wins? They're like 15, 20, 21. They even brought Dick Motta back and Roy Tarpley that was coming off a drug suspension just to get the like 30, 35 wins. And when Nelly came in as GM, he just traded the whole starting team.
yeah.
Uh, so, I mean, 98 was Dirk's rookie season, but 99 was really when, so you had a whole decade. The new Mavs fans don't realize that we didn't always have a decade of success. Dirk brought us 2 decades of success, and Luca added another half decade to that. But yeah, if you suffered through the '90's, you certainly appreciate a team that can win 50 games a year.
Facts. And that's why I put Luca on that list in regards to top five that could make it in the 90's. I think he would have been traded for sure from Dallas in the 90's. So he would have made another squad and he would have been phenomenal.
Well, the reason I compared him to Dantley and Aguirre because his game translates to their type of game, and he in the '90's he would have been on the free throw line a lot.
Yeah.
They didn't take many 3-pointers, and point guards didn't usually get that many layups. And there was the three I mentioned: Kevin Johnson and Stevie Francis, and uh, those guys were the only ones that really got to, and that was from quickness. That wasn't from handles.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the
I
90's
mean,
is tough
so
for
let
sure.
me ask you this before we sign off. Who is today's AI?
Who is today's AI? Kyrie. Even AI would tell you that. Kyrie is today's AI. And barring his injury, how he comes back, I mean, kind of I don't think AI had any major injuries that caused him to be not known for who he was as far as ball handling. But Kyrie is the Pistol Pete of our era, if you will. I never watched Pistol Pete, but I've seen some of his highlights, and the dude it was an amazing dribbler. So Kyrie and Pistol Pete kind of mirror each other. And Iverson, he
Well,
was
you
pretty
were probably young, but Jason Williams was in the modern day Pete Maravich when he came through when he played for Sacramento.
he was with Sacramento. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
him. So yeah, I would say Kyrie would be
What did
the
they call him? White chocolate?
yup. Yeah, he was dope. Him, what was the other kid who was pretty decent? I can't remember his name, but they were really, really good. It had some very good guards back then. 2000s we got to talk about the 2000 next podcast because the 2000s was really when basketball took that turn to the new era where we are now. So we're definitely going to reach back on that one. Anything else you want to add to that one, that subject?
No, I'm good.
All right,
Did
man.
you like Ben Terrell being compared to your favorite Chris Webber of the 90's?
Swish for real. You know I was. Banchero, man. That dude is a beast. So I got to get out to a game. When he comes to Dallas, I have to make a note to buy some tickets just to even watch him so I can give him his
I
salute.
That's the game I picked of my 5 games. That's one of the 5 games I picked.
Nice. I'm gonna try to make it so I can
I'll
see him
text
play in
I'll
person.
text you the date so you can put it on your calendar.
Man, I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Bob, it's been an amazing show, man. I appreciate you coming on again, chiming it up with us, being my co-host. You're always amazing with the stats. Tell the people where they can find you on these social media streets, man. Give me your handles and let them know where they can find you.
Well, up here, Swish for real.
Swish
Swish
for
for real.
real.
Uh,
Swish for real.
and then I'm getting a lot of traction on my at Boogie Bob, which is down there. Uh, but yeah, Swish for real is the main thing. Like, subscribe, comment, pass the word around.
Yeah, absolutely. And still haven't got anybody to win that t-shirt. We haven't had any comments. So leave us a comment, guys. We're gonna give you a t-shirt just for commenting. If it's gonna be a random selection. If it's more than one person, if it's just one person to comment, you win. If it's more than one person, we'll select your name out of a hat and we'll contact you and get you that t-shirt. You'll get a Swish for real, straight from Swish for real from us. You can find me on X, Mikhail Lampkin, poet.director. Same thing on YouTube, Mikhail Lampkin, poet.director. So if you want to see some of my work. And also, I'm always on Swish for real, man, because I'm a basketball fan first, movie second. And I love it, man. So I'm pretty chill with what I do. So if you want to catch up with me, you can catch me on any of those platforms. And I'm just here to talk basketball. Bob, thank you so much, man. Swish for real, guys. We had a great show. We are signing out. We're out. Peace.
That's it, Pray.